So today what we'll be doing is a nice loose kind of painting with ink and watercolor of some peaches. So this is my reference photo where I have kind of a sliced half and then a full picture. I mean, you can apply these same techniques to a different picture, but this is kind of the picture that I'm working from. So I have it lightly sketched out ahead of time, but basically since we're trying to keep it fairly loose with this picture, when you're trying to draw it, you don't want to spend a lot of time on your drawing. So I might even just kind of start with a circle for that first half of my peach. And then kind of have the leaf curving down. And then what's interesting about the second half is it's at a slight tilt. So a lot of times I'll start with kind of this shape is like an ellipse, which is like kind of a squash circle. So I would kind of start with that shape first. And then I would start off kind of looking at how it kind of lumps in, gets a little pointy, not too pointy. It's kind of like a heart, but like a really lumpy heart. And then I have this kind of bottom part that comes down. And then I have kind of my seed in the middle. So that's how you want to kind of start your drawing, very, very loosely. That's how I have mine on here as well. I went back in and kind of erased some of my extra lines, but that's kind of the basic shape you want to have. So, and then when I'm adding my ink, I also want to really keep it loose. So when you're trying to keep something really loose, you don't want to have a lot of, tight, scrunched up lines. Sometimes I'll even hold my pencil back here rather than all the way down. And you can decide what kind of weight or thickness you want your pen to be. I sometimes find it's easier with a thin pen. And I'm doing a couple lines when I'm outlining my little pear, almost as if I'm sketching it out, but I already have my pencil as kind of a nice outline to follow. And I even use kind of some lines around my objects just to kind of emphasize the looseness and kind of the movement I want. Even though they're not really moving, but it kind of helps just to emphasize those qualities. They're almost like sketchy lines where I'm not really completing a full picture. It's kind of just hinting at what shape or colors are going to be there. And if you have any mess ups, you're kind of incorporating them into your picture, keeping it really loose, having a lot of fun lines going on. And I could do a little bit of shading back here, just to kind of show how that peach is in front of the other one. And then even a little bit of shadowing for under my peaches. So once I have that started, it's up to you how many extra lines. If you want to go really crazy and have a lot of lines or keep it fairly simple. What also makes it really interesting is having a mixture of thick and thin lines. So right now I have a lot of thin lines. So I could come in with my kind of thicker pen, just kind of emphasize some of those lines that I want on there, but it doesn't have to be everywhere. And then I'm going to start working on my color. So I'm using a number 6 round where it's not too big, but also not too small. And I'm going to start coming in with my yellows. And on my peach, There's some really nice yellows back here. And to keep this nice and loose, I'm not trying to be too precise. I'm just kind of blocking in the color, but also keeping those directional lines. So you can kind of see how I'm curving towards the center. And I'll put some yellow, which this is like a cadmium yellow, so it's nice and warm. It's not too bright. So I want to put this yellow basically all over this area, and I'll come in with a little bit of cadmium red while this is still wet, and I'll just kind of drop it in, and that'll create some really nice bleeding. And then since this is now a little bit drier, I didn't want it sopping wet, but now it's a little bit drier, I can work in some orange kind of in between some of those little yellow areas. And it's nice to leave some of those little white spots for highlights. And then down here needs to be a little bit darker than the rest of the orange. I mean the oranges in the picture. So I've mixed a little bit of a darker orange with just, you know, using more red. I can also plop some of that on some of these areas of my peach. Also, my little seedling could use a really good layer of that orange. And then I'm going to use some sap green and yellow to kind of start off my little leaf. And I'll drop in some of that dark green. And I'm going to make a really nice dark orange. Again, just by adding, see, I'm kind of adding a little bit more red to my yellow. I'm just going to drop that in. And the key is not to touch it very much. And even though this is a loose painting, I still want to make sure I'm looking at my reference for kind of where those colors are going to go. And I'm going to take a little green in my yellow, make it a little dark where it's meeting the rest of my orange. And then I can even make that stem on my peach a little brown with some Van Dyke brown and red. And I'm going to also do that same color, a little bit darker, for some of the details and shadows on my seed. And I'm mainly keeping it on this side because that's where most of my shadows are. And I'm going to put a little bit of red on this side. And then on the very edges of my peach, you can kind of see how it gets a little bit warmer. So I'm going to take a little bit of a warmer yellow, which could be a Naples yellow, or it could be your yellow with a little red to it. I'm just putting it on the very edges of my peach. And I'm going to use that yellow to kind of help bridge the gap. And a little bit of water. And then of course my brown again, with a little red, which that should mainly be red for that little bleeding area in here. And then for fun, I could take some of my other colors and kind of splatter them if I was waiting for something to dry, just by kind of tapping. You can also use a little water to create kind of some splotches. And then some of the last things I would want to do on my peach is just adding some more darks onto my leaf. And I could use the darks of my leaves to kind of surround the veins, or even I could lift up kind of the veins while it's still wet, and then come back in with a little of my green to make it a little bit thinner. And you know, some things you can always wait until they're dry. Like this is a great loose layer, and then I could wait for it to be completely dry and then come back in and darken my stem. I could do some really, really darks on my little seed, because they tend to have, you know, those little holes in them. And there you go. That's how to do some loose peaches.